Brisbane, Australia, a city of warm breezes, bright skies, and quiet suburban neighborhoods nestled between patches of bushland and winding streets. On the edge of one such street stood a modest, single-story home where Anton Nguyen lived with his family, his elderly mother, his younger brother, and a rather loud but dearly beloved pet named Eric. Eric was no ordinary bird, a vibrant green and yellow parrot with a cheeky personality and a vocabulary that would surprise most humans. Eric was more than just a companion. He was part of the family. Anton had raised him from a chick. From the very beginning, Eric had shown a remarkable knack for mimicking speech. What started as whistles and chirps quickly turned into words, then full phrases. "Good morning." "Where's my snack?" "Love you." And Anton's personal favorite, a dramatic, "Oh no!" Eric's voice echoed through the house daily, often at the most inopportune moments, startling guests or interrupting phone calls. But the family adored him. He brought life and color to their home, a kind of unpredictable charm that no one could resist. Anton would often joke with friends, "If this house ever catches fire, Eric will probably be the one to call for help before anyone else." He had no idea how prophetic those words would be. Life in the Nguyen household was simple, filled with routine and laughter. Anton worked long days as a mechanic, while his mother enjoyed tending her small backyard garden. His younger brother was still in school, often glued to a screen or buried in homework. Eric? He ruled the house. He had his favorite perch by the front window, from which he could observe both the garden and the street. He screeched at delivery drivers, sang along with TV jingles, and sometimes cursed under his breath when he thought no one was listening, a result of Anton's brother teaching him phrases for fun. But despite his sass, Eric was deeply attuned to the people around him. He sensed moods. He chirped excitedly when Anton came home tired. He whistled softly when someone was sad. He even knew how to mimic the microwave beep to alert them when dinner was ready. And every night, like clockwork, Eric would settle into his cage beside the window, covered gently with a dark cloth, a sign that the house was going to sleep. So it was on that night in January 2020. The day had been like any other. Anton returned home late, grease on his hands, a sandwich in a paper bag from the corner deli. His mother was already in bed. His brother was nodding off on the couch. Eric greeted him with a sing-song, "Anton's home," as usual. Anton smiled, reached into the cage to give him a peanut, then went through his nightly routine. Locked the front door, turned off the porch light, set the kettle for morning tea. "Good night, buddy," he said, tapping Eric's cage lightly. "Good night," Eric chirped back. Within an hour, the house was silent. Outside, the warm Australian night hummed with the soft drone of cicadas and the distant rustling of wind through eucalyptus trees. Inside, 3 people and 1 parrot drifted into dreams, unaware that something was already going terribly wrong. In the far corner of the house, behind a wall no one ever checked, a faulty power outlet sparked once, twice, then ignited a thin strand of insulation. It didn't take much. The wall cavity, filled with dust and aged timber, was the perfect kindling. Within minutes, the fire had begun to spread. Smoke crept upward, seeping through cracks and filling the attic with its acrid breath. But the smoke alarm, mounted in the hallway, distant from the source, remained silent. In the cage near the front window, Eric stirred beneath his cover. A strange scent filled the air. Then, a faint hiss, a pop, and a low crackling noise, like distant thunder buried under floorboards. Eric's head jerked up. His claws gripped the perch. He tilted his head once, twice. Then, without warning, he let out a deafening screech. "Fire! Fire! Fire! Fire!" Anton sat bolt upright in bed. The clock read 2:36 a.m. At first, he thought he was dreaming. Then came another scream, louder, more urgent. "Fire! Anton! Fire!" It wasn't the smoke alarm. It wasn't a neighbor. It was Eric. And the tone in the bird's voice, shrill, panicked, unlike anything Anton had ever heard, snapped his brain into action. He leapt from the bed and opened his door. Instantly, the thick, sour scent of smoke hit him in the face. It was real. It was happening. He raced to his mother's room, shaking her awake, then dragged his brother off the couch. "Out! Now!" he shouted, coughing. The hallway lights flickered. Orange light glowed faintly from the kitchen. The fire was moving fast. Anton grabbed Eric's cage without thinking, tore off the cover, and ran. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around them like a slap. His mother, coughing. His brother, wide-eyed and barefoot. And Eric, flapping his wings and shouting, "Anton! Anton! Fire!" Behind them, flames licked at the eaves of the roof. Neighbors were already on their lawns, dialing emergency numbers, their faces painted with shock. Anton watched as the house, the home he'd grown up in, full of memories and laughter, began to burn. But none of that mattered in the moment. They were alive, all of them, because of a bird. As fire trucks howled through the night and firefighters battled the blaze, one of them turned to Anton and asked, "How did you know? You didn't have a working smoke detector?" Anton, still trembling, pointed to the cage on the grass beside him. "My parrot," he said hoarsely. "He warned me." The firefighter blinked, then looked at the bird, who blinked back and calmly muttered, "Fire." The flames had devoured half the house by the time the first fire truck screeched to a stop in front of the Nguyen family's yard. Anton stood barefoot on the wet grass, his heart pounding in his chest, eyes wide as he watched smoke billow into the sky like a dark storm cloud. His mother leaned against his arm, coughing softly but safe. His brother sat beside them, trembling, his face pale under the flickering light of the street lamps. And there, in the cage resting on the grass, Eric shifted restlessly on his perch. "Fire?" he squawked again, as if to make sure everyone understood the danger. One of the firefighters, a tall man in a soot-streaked helmet, gave the bird a startled glance, then turned back to his team. "Move fast!" he barked. "The roof's going to go!" Hoses uncoiled. Water sprayed in powerful arcs toward the hungry flames. Anton could barely think. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins, his ears rang, and his breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. He glanced at his mother, at his brother, and finally at Eric. The little bird, feathers slightly ruffled but alive, tilted his head and blinked at Anton, as if to say, "We made it." By sunrise, the fire had been beaten back. The once cozy house now stood as a skeleton of blackened beams and smoldering rubble. Parts of the roof had collapsed. The living room was gone. Anton's tools, the family photo albums, the furniture, all reduced to ash. But despite the devastation, no lives had been lost. A small crowd had gathered along the sidewalk, drawn by the sirens and the glow of the flames. Neighbors in robes and slippers murmured in disbelief, their faces pale in the early morning light. "I can't believe it," one whispered. "They got out in time." "Because of the parrot," another replied, shaking his head in wonder. "That bird woke them up." Anton, still shivering from the chill of the dawn air and the shock of the night, crouched beside Eric's cage and opened the door. The parrot hopped out, flapped his wings once, and climbed onto Anton's arm. "You saved us, mate," Anton said hoarsely, stroking Eric's feathers with trembling fingers. You bloody well saved us. Eric nuzzled against his hand, then clicked his beak. Good boy, Eric chirped, as if accepting the praise. Anton couldn't help but let out a shaky laugh, a sound somewhere between relief and awe. Within hours, news vans began to arrive. Reporters spilled onto the street, their cameras trained on the charred remains of the house, their microphones thrust toward firefighters and witnesses. A female reporter in a navy blue blazer caught sight of Anton and hurried over, her cameraman following close behind. "Sir, is it true your parrot warned you about the fire?" she asked breathlessly. Anton, still cradling Eric in his arms, nodded. "Yeah," he rasped. "Eric woke us up. Before the smoke alarm. Before anything." The reporter's eyes widened. "Before the alarm?" she repeated. "That's incredible." The cameraman zoomed in on Eric, who puffed up his feathers, clearly enjoying the attention. "Fire!" Eric shouted at the lens, making the reporter jump back in surprise. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The reporter recovered quickly and smiled at the camera. "You heard it here," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "A true feathered hero. Thanks to Eric the parrot, an entire family was saved from a devastating house fire." Over the next few days, Eric's story spread across Australia. Local news stations aired clips of Anton's interview, spliced with footage of the smoldering ruins of the house and shots of Eric perched proudly on Anton's shoulder. Headlines read, "Hero Parrot Saves Family from Blaze." "Feathered Fire Alarm. Eric the Parrot Warns Family of Danger." "Bird of Courage. Parrot Alerts Sleeping Family Just in Time." Radio hosts discussed the story with admiration and amazement. One caller to a popular morning show said, "I never thought a pet bird could save a life, let alone a whole family. What a legend." Social media exploded with posts and shares. Photos of Eric, eyes bright, feathers fluffed, circulated widely, captioned with words like "lifesaver" and "not all heroes wear capes." People from all over the country sent messages of support to the Nguyen family. Some offered donations to help them rebuild. Others simply wrote letters expressing gratitude for Eric's quick thinking. "He's not just your hero," one letter read. "He's Australia's hero." Anton, overwhelmed by the outpouring of kindness, made sure Eric received every bit of credit. In interviews, he emphasized the bird's role. "The fire alarm didn't even go off," he told one journalist. "It was Eric who saved us. If he hadn't started yelling, we wouldn't be standing here." At one point, a local pet store even offered to send Eric a year's supply of treats. "Any parrot who saves lives deserves the finest seeds," the store owner joked. Anton accepted gratefully, knowing Eric had more than earned his reward. Despite the media frenzy, Eric remained his usual cheeky self. When reporters visited the temporary housing where the Nguyens were staying, Eric greeted them with enthusiastic squawks. "Fire! Fire!" he called, as if reliving his moment of glory. Anton's brother taught him a new phrase, too. "Hero bird." Eric quickly added it to his growing vocabulary, much to everyone's delight. It seemed as though the little parrot understood he was a star. He puffed up proudly during interviews, posed for photos with journalists, and basked in the affection showered upon him by fans. But beneath the playful antics, Eric never strayed far from Anton's side. Through the chaos and upheaval, the bird remained loyal, a comforting presence amid the rubble of their former life. As days turned into weeks, Anton began the difficult process of rebuilding. Insurance claims, paperwork, meetings with contractors. It was exhausting. Yet, every evening, when he returned to their temporary home, Eric was there to greet him with a cheerful, "Good boy," or a soft whistle. And every time Anton heard that familiar voice, his heart lifted. He would reach out to stroke Eric's head, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him. "You really are something special," he would murmur. And Eric, ever the showman, would click his beak and reply, "Hero bird." Anton chuckled each time, a small but vital spark of joy amid the long recovery. The community, too, never forgot Eric's bravery. At a local town event, the mayor himself invited Anton and Eric to attend a special ceremony. Before a crowd of hundreds, the mayor presented Eric with an honorary medal, a small, shiny token attached to a red ribbon. As the audience applauded, Eric flapped his wings and let out a triumphant cry. "Fire! Fire! Hero bird!" Laughter and cheers erupted from the crowd. For Anton and his family, it was a moment of pride that made all the hardship worthwhile. Here, standing beneath the bright blue Australian sky, they celebrated not only survival, but the bond between a man and his unlikely savior. Eric's story didn't fade with time. Months later, people still stopped Anton on the street to ask about the famous parrot. Children pointed excitedly, whispering, "That's him! That's the hero bird!" Pet lovers across the country shared stories of their own clever animals, inspired by Eric's courage. And in schools, teachers used Eric's story to teach children about emergency preparedness and about the surprising heroes that can come in small, feathered packages. For Anton, Eric's heroism was a daily reminder of life's fragile beauty. He thought often about that night, the moment between sleep and wakefulness when Eric's alarm had cut through the haze of dreams and saved them all. If he hadn't screamed? Anton didn't let himself finish the thought. Instead, he focused on the present, on rebuilding, on family, on the bright, clever bird who had given them a second chance. And every morning, when he greeted Eric with a soft, "Good morning, mate," the parrot answered with his usual cheerful cry, "Hero bird!" And truly, there was no better title for him. Months had passed since the night that changed everything. The Nguyen family was still in the process of rebuilding their home, but in many ways, life had settled into a new kind of rhythm, one that pulsed with gratitude, resilience, and, of course, the ever-present voice of Eric. Each morning began the same way. As the sun rose over the Brisbane skyline and the warmth of the day crept through the windows of their temporary rental home, Eric greeted Anton with his usual burst of enthusiasm. "Hero bird," he sang brightly. Anton smiled every time. Even now, long after the flames had been extinguished and the ashes cleared away, those two simple words were enough to flood his heart with a complex mix of pride, relief, and wonder. Because Eric wasn't just a pet anymore. He was a living symbol of hope. The new house was under construction not far from their original neighborhood. Anton had chosen to rebuild close to home, unwilling to abandon the community that had rallied around them in their time of need. Each day, he visited the construction site to check on the progress. Bricks were laid. Frames were raised. Walls slowly took shape, forming the outline of the home they had once known. And Eric? Eric came along for every visit, perched confidently on Anton's shoulder like a feathery foreman. The construction workers loved him. "He's keeping an eye on us," one joked, as Eric bobbed his head. "Make sure you're using fireproof materials." Another laughed, glancing at the parrot with playful respect. Eric puffed up his chest and, as if on cue, squawked, "Fire! Fire!" The workers erupted in laughter. Eric had become more than just a hero. He was the heart of the family's new beginning. Beyond the building site, Eric's fame continued to grow. Local newspapers followed up on his story, running features about his role in the Nguyen family's recovery. One popular magazine dedicated a full-page spread to him, complete with a professional photo of Eric wearing a tiny red hero cape, specially sewn by a local fan. The caption read, "From Pet to Protector, How Eric the Parrot Saved His Family and Stole Australia's Heart." Online, his videos were shared thousands of times. Clips of Eric repeating "Hero Bird" and "Fire" were set to catchy music, turning him into an internet sensation. People from all walks of life wrote messages to Anton, thanking him for sharing Eric's story. "Your parrot reminded me how precious life is," one message read. Another said simply, "Eric is proof that heroes come in all shapes and sizes." Schools across Australia began using Eric's story as part of their fire safety lessons. Teachers explained how even though pets aren't a substitute for smoke alarms, they can still play an important role in emergencies. Children eagerly recounted the tale of the brave parrot who had saved his family, their imaginations alight with wonder. Some even drew colorful pictures of Eric, complete with speech bubbles. "Fire! Fire!" Anton received several of these drawings in the mail. He pinned them up in their temporary living room, a daily reminder of the lives Eric had touched beyond their own. Eric, for his part, seemed to enjoy the attention immensely. Whenever Anton showed him the drawings, Eric would squawk proudly, bobbing his head as if to say, "Yes, that's me." But beneath all the fanfare, Anton cherished something far more personal than fame. It was the bond between him and Eric, a connection forged not by tricks or training, but by trust and instinct. Late at night, when the house grew quiet and shadows stretched long across the walls, Anton would sit by Eric's cage and reflect on that fateful night. The what-ifs haunted him. What if Eric hadn't called out? What if they had slept just a few minutes longer? What if the fire had taken more than possessions? Every time those thoughts crept into his mind, Anton would look at Eric, asleep on his perch, feathers fluffed against the cool night air, and feel a deep, overwhelming wave of gratitude. "You saved us, mate," he would whisper. And though Eric never answered in words, the gentle rise and fall of his chest was all the reply Anton needed. Life inevitably moved forward. As the new house neared completion, the Nguyen family began to rebuild not just their home, but their lives. Neighbors pitched in to help, bringing over meals, helping Anton's mother plant a new garden, and offering spare furniture to replace what had been lost. Eric oversaw every delivery with keen eyes, occasionally offering commentary. "Good boy," he chirped when a new sofa arrived. "Fire?" he questioned when boxes of supplies were carried in, prompting laughter from everyone present. In many ways, Eric had become the neighborhood's mascot. Children passing by the yard called out to him. Neighbors waved and smiled at the sight of the bright green bird perched in the window. For the Nguyens, Eric's presence turned the painful process of rebuilding into something lighter, something filled with moments of joy amidst the work. On the day they moved back into their newly finished home, Anton carried Eric over the threshold first. The bird let out a cheerful squawk, flapped his wings, and declared to the empty house, "Hero bird!" Anton laughed, tears stinging his eyes. "Yes, you are," he replied, setting Eric's cage by the window where it had always stood. The familiar view greeted them, the street, the garden, the sky. It wasn't just a house, it was a home once more, and Eric, in his rightful place, was its guardian. As the months turned to years, Eric's story remained a beloved chapter in the community's history. The mayor invited him back for annual safety events, where children cheered and firefighters smiled at the sight of the feathered hero. Eric basked in the attention, preening and repeating his favorite lines. "Fire, hero bird, good boy." Anton watched these scenes with quiet pride. What had started as a moment of instinctive panic had blossomed into something extraordinary. A story that had touched hearts far beyond their quiet Brisbane neighborhood. And though life eventually settled into normalcy, the memory of that night and the courage of a small green parrot remained etched into every corner of their rebuilt home. In the end, Eric wasn't just a pet. He was a protector, a symbol of resilience, proof that love, loyalty, and a sharp voice can make all the difference when it matters most. He reminded everyone who heard his story that heroes aren't defined by their size or species. They're defined by their actions, by their heart. And Eric's heart, though feathered and fragile, burned brighter than any flame.